Let's talk about that recent video from Doodletones, addressing that roleplay one last time.
This video contains some triggering topics. Viewer discretion is advised. You got what you asked for. So far this year, not only have I been dealing with excessive cleanup from years prior in the SCC, but it looks like, once again, I'm going to have to deal with excessive cleanup on my end because no one fucking understands anything and still wants to hold shit over my head from nearly a decade ago. So the inspiration for this particular iteration of me addressing the things that refuse to let me go was Madlib's art, an ex-art commentator who decided to go salted earth when she didn't need to on Twitter, February 23rd, 2024. In this thread, she, very out of nowhere may I add, throws extra shade on me after already saying that I was a bad person for empathetically saying someone else could have merely forgotten a screenshot for a situation that they were involved in, for talking about things that people hold me to from so many years ago, specifically mentioning that I called it diaper shit from 2014. Not only is this part unnecessary in a thread talking about a chat known as the Fruitcake Club since it had nothing to do with the particularly bad behavior within that chat, but it's also holding me to a particularly pedantic complaint about something that's still true! Madlib's complaint is with me calling this stuff diaper shit that I did in 2014 that people still hold me to, but specifically brings up a particular RP that I did when I roleplayed as a childlike character in 2015 as a way to call me dishonest. But I still did diaper-related fetishy shit in 2014 that people have taken issue with, so you're really just doing Akumu's dirty work for him, and it shows.
Anyone who dares to acknowledge your degenerate roleplay is just doing my dirty work for me. Interesting choice of words though. Dirty work. Would drawing yourself shitting in a diaper, roleplaying as an 8-year-old to be groped in said roleplay, and thinking of yourself younger for some sexual gratification count as dirty work? While you huff that copium, Madlibs didn't deny you doing diaper shit in that statement. Madlibs was saying you chalked it up to just diaper shit when the roleplay with Kirby involves you roleplaying as a character you describe as no physically older than 8. Which is more than just diaper shit. You know that, but you'd rather pretend as though there's some contradiction on her part to take issue with. Keep this in mind for later. Really, just keep as much as you can of the information said in mind for the end of the video.
But in any case, I'm not here specifically to rag on Madlibs, or even Akumu. I'm certainly not happy with either, but that's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to compile the history of my involvement with weird fetishy stuff, specifically talk and address the roleplays that I did back then, explain how I got there and why, probably once again condemn younger me for getting involved in an environment that could have put me in danger, and put that shit out there for the upteenth billionth time because addressing this shit genuinely never ends and no one ever hears me address it.
Bullshitting everyone about it is not addressing it. And again, this will be important in a little bit. You and Nezimonster both have this problem of thinking downplaying or lying counts as addressing something. Madlibs claimed that you chalked it up to just diaper shit, and you do. Anytime anyone ever talks about your roleplays, you and your audience love to claim it's always about the diaper shitting kink, and that it's baseless, outdated accusations and rhetoric. Nothing about this is an accusation or baseless. The proof's been there for years, but you and your friends have tried to play damage control and deny it for years, and that's why it's so funny. And you and your friends are still trying to do it. Now I'm going to play some rather lengthy clips just in case the SEC or anyone else tries to claim I'm cutting the context in some attempt to invalidate my video.
And I have addressed all of this shit in the past. Too many times to count, frankly. We'll call back to at least one of those videos going through this again. So let's talk about my general journey into the world of fetish art. Before we do though, I want to make something clear as we go through this. I was born January 18th, 1997. I am 27 years old as of this video, but if you're watching this in the future, you can do the math to figure out how old I am by the time of you watching this. This time, I'm not holding anything back. I'll talk about some things that I've never talked about before, some things that I had to get reminded of recently, some of it's uncomfortable, some of it's genuinely traumatic, but enough time has passed that I think addressing this will finally get people to understand a bit better. Not that I think it'll do anything to get people to drop the subject, like, God knows most of these people are only throwing this at me as a way to get me to fuck off, but nearly a decade later, and I have a much better grasp and understanding of what I actually did wrong, and so we can talk about it. Also, it'll just be nice to have this video to throw at people. I think it'd also be a good PSA. You'll understand. Anyway, so to start, let me paint a picture. I've been online most of my life. As little as 6 or 7 years old, I was allowed on my mother's computer to play EverQuest, so I'm as terminally online as they come, which has its own brand of issues with it, but we're not going to get into those right now. As I grew up, obviously I had a variety of places that I would frequent, people that I would talk to, and just everything you'd expect a kid to realistically be doing on the World Wide Web. Initially, it started simple. I would be mostly on kid sites like Sticker World, Armor Games, Cartoon Network, kid spaces that you'd expect kids to be on. The worst in my early years I can remember that I did was created a YouTube channel when I was 12 and the Music Shake a year later, but generally that's as far as I can remember. It's when I had hit my teen years that things really started to go downhill, as that's when I joined DeviantArt and started posting there.
It's always DeviantArt, Tumblr, or Amino. Every fucking time.
Apparently, I was really into the 4chan rules of the internet at the time because my first upload was of what I had deemed a simple Rule 63 of myself. Truly, I showed no signs of being trans. No siree. Joking aside, I have no idea where I met the rules of the internet, or even the specific one in question, but I recalled that I had them saved on my school iPad at the time, so that's what got me to draw the first iteration of my Sona, posted November 12th, 2011. So what I would have been 14 years of age if I'm doing my math right. By 2012, I would post a few things worth of note on DeviantArt. Apparently by this point I was using a social chatting service known as Chatango, a place where anyone could contact you if they wanted to just by scrolling through an extensive user list. Here, I know I was definitely sent my first dick pic, as that was something that spooked me so much that I wrote a song about it, and the extra porn bot accounts that would send me links to cam sites for Music Shake. As questionable as these lyrics are, the general event absolutely did happen. I also had confirmed myself as getting a Skype by this point, where I would talk to some of my longest friends that I met through a live streaming Minecraft place called Ghost in the Stream. Now, mind you, Ghost in the Stream itself used Chatango for its chatbot, so that doubly helps in the "doodle was not where she was supposed to be" idea. I had also confirmed that I was a user on a social game known as Imvu, which, if you know what that is, there's not really much of a reason to explain the problems there. Definitely shouldn't be on there when you're less than 18. There was also a particularly interesting jump between two images, being the first of two dare images that I would make, and the 9th page of a comic that I was creating at the time, where we had a character physically and mentally age regress to bypass weirdness in the setting, but only to create more weirdness in real life for me, though one could make the argument in favor of this just being unfortunate implications. However, the implications are still unfortunate. Recall that by this point, though, I would have been 15, if my math is correct. Moving on into age 16, I created the Transformation World comic, one where much of the irresponsible and gross things started popping up. Specifically, ABDL themes, because gender swapping was, always a thing that I was aware of. That was in, most TV shows I had watched as a kid, but these other themes had to come from somewhere, yeah? There's no way I would have just known of this stuff, would I? Hold that thought, because I'm going somewhere with this.
I want you to take notes of the dates on those screenshots, the age regression and diaper shitting in particular. Susie was doing this shit in 2013. It'll be important in just a few minutes.
2014, so age 17, still a minor. A lot of things start falling into place. So not only do I start getting super into fetish content, being super supportive of others, and even doing my first error message erotic roleplay that turned into what we are eventually going to get into talking about, creating fetish-centric characters, which had gotten me in trouble when a character wasn't supposed to be sexual, but whose themes were questionable at best, started popping up in other people's communities, and just all in all getting into content that I should not have gotten myself involved with. I even went back and started reviewing some of the content that I already had consumed to talk about the... right, there it is. So... in my review of a manga called Mika ni Harassment, one that I did for two friends who were not into that kind of content, by the way, I mentioned that this was the thing that got me invested in fetish content as a whole. Obviously, I'm not going to go down the everything that this manga was about, but all that needs to be said is that it's an ecchi manga that portrays a lot of themes of voyeurism, pet play, and age play. Now, I don't remember the exact how I found this, but I know it had something to do with the Chitango chat that I, at the time, frequented because it was connected to a website where you could just watch anime. A thing like Kiss Anime, but it has a chat box with randos feeding you anime and manga recommendations. It was brought up amongst a chat there, and I read it, and then followed that up with several other ecchi pieces of media that manga websites would list alongside it. To clarify, it was this piece of media being talked about with a curious minor in the room, and it was this and other related media that made me so desensitized to sexual topics. This was what garnered me my initial intrigue. This is precisely why it's important, actually, to not have kids be around NSFW topics and themes, as it's shit like this that endangers them to potentially get groomed or put into other sexually explicit situations.
Interesting take. If that's your stance, why did you never say anything about what went on in the FCK server? I'm not saying you had to make a video, but you didn't say anything about it to anyone. Does the FCK server not count? The adults that were sharing porn and having sexual conversations around minors, is that different to you, Doodles? Is that what went on there? Because I'm pretty certain that's what happened.
And I know this now, obviously, but look at where I was leading up to turning 18. I was, knowingly or not, putting myself in danger hanging around these communities. And it's again, not just the ABDL communities either. I had role plays that had furry themes involved. I had inflation roleplay, macro, bimbo, humiliation, futanari, S&M. Like I had a whole RP with basically everything under the sun in it. It's frankly no wonder I watched Bondage Game. But again, I was 17 at the time of all of these examples. I was a minor, which still isn't good, mind you. I'm not saying it was, but I am trying to put all of this into perspective. This was more or less my upbringing in my teen years. I was always online. I was online homeschooled. I was struggling in classes, stressed out, and then being desensitized to sexual themes. It's a no wonder that I used roleplay like that to escape reality. I know. You don't want to hear I was in a bad place. It's not what I'm saying, but you don't want to hear it anyway. So, let's move on then. With all of this laid out, moving into 2015, January 18th rolls around and I become legally an adult. I hit 18. Mind you, I'm still doing role plays by this point, and while I don't exactly realize what day I dropped out of high school, I was still definitely stressed the fuck out about it all. So, these role plays were definitely my go-to. On March 21st, 2015, I released the infamous Game Girl RP. Those who have watched Doodle is Cringe may recall me already addressing this one directly and condemning the action itself. See, to give a bit of context, I was doing online homeschool from 2012 to 2015, and it was just downright the worst due to the classes on the site being laid out differently class to class, scheduling problems that caused class gatherings to overlap, and so I'd be marked as absent. My internet connection didn't help matters either, as having a stable connection to do and or turn in the classwork wasn't always there. And well, yeah, I won't lie and say there wasn't some aspects that distracted me. I was connected to the internet, not helped by the fact that I had no outside connections and felt isolated for 3 years of my life. And boy am I glad I'm not in academics currently, because I would not want to go back. Things haven't exactly been better, but I'll take what I got now over what I went through in that time frame. Anyway, the point is that I needed a mental break, shown by the plethora of vent art that I made at the time. And this is where we get into role-playing, specifically transformation and fetish role-plays. I won't go too in detail about each RP I did, because I don't feel as if there's a lot to talk about, to be honest, which, given how people often talked about it, you'd figure there would be, but there's really not. Most didn't really go anywhere, do anything interesting digging through them. However, there was one that I would be amiss to talk about, the Game Girl RP. Technically, this is out of order since it was 2015, but since we're talking about them now, and this one did spark up a little bit of controversy in 2018 that got some very not so nice allegations lobbed at me, I feel like I should talk about it now. Mainly because of the not thought out descriptor of the character not being physically older than 8 years old, and then having one of the people I was role playing with have a character that was supposed to be moldable, grow breasts only to grope them. It's a little creepy, sure. I don't really have an excuse for how creepy it sounds, and I'm not going to defend it on the basis of it being creepy or otherwise uncomfortable. I was a stupid 18-year-old by this point who didn't know how to tell people that I was uncomfortable.
That clip has Susie again claiming he was made uncomfortable with the roleplay, but just didn't know how to tell people that. There are plenty of people like that who are too nice and polite to convey that they're uncomfortable with something. So I would buy that if Doodles hadn't made an alt and returned on the alt to continue the roleplay. Now, aside from expansion, what else can you do? I can be any way you want me basically. Well, could you eat me? SD the Doodler then comes in and says she does so, leaving you in her stomach. Don't panic, it's me, Doodle. My journal should explain it all. Wow, it's amazing in here. You start feeling a burning sensation.
Though the purpose of the RP wasn't to be sexual, that's just where the role player took it, and I allowed it. And obviously, 5 years after this roleplay, and I haven't done anything similar since, even when I was still doing the fetishy roleplays in 2016, aged 19, I think it's safe to say that I've learned from this. It was just one of those of-the-time things that I grew from. In any case, yeah, it's creepy. But I learned from where my boundaries were doing these, and they were a good source of escapism during a time where I really needed it, so I don't particularly feel as if I regret having done the RPs, no matter how many people believe that I probably should. It's just one of those things that I can look back at and cringe, knowing that I grew from.
The same shit that Lyle went on to repeat. Of course, because they're doing damage control. Whether it was intended to be sexual or not does not change the fact that you were fine with it going in that direction. You claim you weren't, yet it did, and it lasted a month. You claim you were uncomfortable with it, but didn't know how to tell Kirby that. Yet you returned on an alt account to continue the roleplay because your grandmother found out about your main account. And big shock, thought you were mentally ill. Someone who's uncomfortable with something, but doesn't know how to convey it, doesn't return to continue the same thing that made them uncomfortable. They would take the chance that appeared to be done with the conversation they were uncomfortable with, and yet you, claiming you were uncomfortable, wanted to continue it. A fact you strangely don't mention in this video, let alone address. That's interesting.
The one thing that I would like to make an addendum for is my lack of regret when last talking about this, because I was made aware of some less than savory things we'll get to here in a sec. But for now, let me focus a little bit more on this roleplay. The misconception about this roleplay being that it was supposed to be inherently sexual is one that I never properly really explained. See, the character was supposed to be a female companion of some kind, yes, but it didn't have to be a sexual one. And I can confirm this by the other two threads that people very commonly overlook. Because Kirby 1250 was not the only person to take up this roleplay. In Nick's story, the two played Mario Kart. In Dragon of Times, she was setting up to be like a babysitter or a maid, and in both those stories she was described as slightly older, looking like a 10-year-old instead of an 8-year-old, which would still be weird if either of those stories went the same way Kirby's did, but all in all, it was not built to be sexual. It was just this one person who took it that direction. And while I'm actually not going to defend the descriptor or the allowing of it to get that far, that's still on me for not drawing that boundary. I will say that with everything leading up to that point, when you put everything into its proper context and not just keeping it in a vacuum at face value, much like these people tend to do, it becomes less Doodle is a degenerate or worse, a predator, and more Doodle actually didn't know any better.
There it is. The copium. No, it doesn't become anything less than Doodletones being a degenerate. Just because you put yourself in those online circles and didn't know any better does not make the roleplay, or you at the time, any less degenerate. You were drawing yourself shitting a diaper. This is a stupid fucking hill to die on.
Because I didn't. I didn't have anyone tell me that I shouldn't be there, and I had grown up in an environment where this kind of behavior was encouraged. I shouldn't have done it. I agree there. That is my fault. I was 18, I was legally an adult. I should have tried to be more responsible in my actions. But I did not realize I was doing anything wrong. Because going even further than that, you might also have the very real argument of Doodle was groomed into it.
It was this exact moment, whilst watching the video, that I immediately knew the exact direction Doodletones was taking this, and the response the audience was going to give. This shit is predictable. Lio is predictable. Doodletones is predictable. And I'm not denying the grooming either. Just watch, listen, and keep those previous posts from 2013 in mind.
And for like a decade, I didn't even realize that I might have been until going through my old Skype logs earlier this month. I don't know where this person is at now, so I suppose this is just for peace of mind at this point and to help contextualize things a bit better, but The same year that I got super into erotic roleplay, I met this person called White Clouds 1988, also known as Alex. We used to chat a lot with each other, and when I say chat a lot, I mean we chatted a lot. We met November 22nd, 2014, so remember I was still 17 at this time.
I'm not going to deny or argue against the grooming. With the age gaps in the conversation Doodle shows, it doesn't fucking surprise me. The issue is that Doodletones met Alex November 22nd of 2014. You heard it from the horse's mouth. He had previously admitted in this same video to drawing age regression and diaper shitting art before 2014.
There's also a particularly interesting jump between two images, being the first of two dare images that I would make, and the 9th page of a comic that I was creating at the time where we had a character physically and mentally age regress to bypass weirdness in the setting, but only to create more weirdness in real life for me, though one could make the argument in favor of this just being unfortunate implications. However, the implications are still unfortunate. Recall that by this point, though, I would have been 15, if my math is correct. Moving on into age 16, I created the Transformation World comic, one where much of the irresponsible and gross things started popping up. Specifically, ABDL themes, because gender swapping was like always a thing that I was aware of. That was in like most TV shows I had watched as a kid, but these other themes had to come from somewhere, yeah? There's no way I would have just known of this stuff, would I? Hold that thought, because I'm going somewhere with this.
So, Susie, you couldn't have been groomed into knowing about or doing these things by Alex because you hadn't met Alex yet. Your own testimony says you were exposed to these things on websites you shouldn't have been on and chose to explore them. You hadn't met Alex yet by the timeline and screenshots you provided in this video. The roleplay you did where you described the characters physically ate was in 2015 and wasn't even with Alex, it was with Kirby. Unless Alex and Kirby are the same individual or Alex was in your DMs pushing you into doing this roleplay with Kirby, but you don't show that in the video. The same roleplay that you have claimed to have apparently made you feel uncomfortable, but you don't mention that you returned on a new account to continue it. This is my problem with the video. Doodletones is trying to blame the degeneracy on the grooming when the degeneracy came before the grooming. It came from Doodletones exploring the internet and deciding to take interest in the degen shit they were exposed to. What Doodles is doing is trying to shield criticism and mockery of the degen shit with the grooming. That way, if anyone dares to criticize or mock the degen shit Doodles got up to, it would look like they're victim blaming. And that's exactly where the audience took it, as I knew they would the second I saw it. Exactly like I thought, they would mention that Doodles was groomed when the degeneracy came before the grooming. It's a classic attempt to shield and excuse it. This is why people still talk about it, because Doodles and Doodletones fans seem to think mentioning other shit will miraculously change it. Doodles' age or how old it is. And the most recent addition to their catalog is Doodles having been groomed. Despite the fact the grooming didn't result in the degeneracy, it was there before it. And some people at home might say that this isn't enough to really firmly say that, especially the SCC. They're going to say that I don't have enough here, as of what I've just given you already. And you know what? I'll entertain that. Doodletones met their groomer November 22nd of 2014. So here's a post from June 9th of 2014, before they met their groomer. It looks like I'm leaving the role-playing community again. Well, why? Why would Doodles be leaving the roleplay community? Let's find out. You suck at roleplaying. Seriously. You implement diapers and transgenders in every story I've done with you. You're too single-minded, and I never want to roleplay with you again. It seems quite a few people agree with this guy, so I'll just go ahead and quit. I don't want to be annoying and boring to people. I was just trying to create my own style of role-playing using the easiest two topics I could think of. But if that's boring and annoying to people, then I'll quit while I'm behind. See you roleplay community on Chitango, DeviantArt and such. I'll miss ya. So Susie quit role-playing because people were getting tired of transgenders in diapers being shoehorned into every roleplay. But he doesn't have a diaper fetish. He's never had a diaper fetish. That's just a ridiculous, outdated accusation from us. Completely baseless. And again, I want to remind you that this is June 19th of 2014. So this is before Doodletones met their groomer. And if that's still not enough for you, how about a clip from this same video that we're talking about that I previously showed you? But I want you to keep in mind that Doodles met their groomer November 22nd of 2014.
We met November 22nd, 2014, so remember I was still 17 at this time.
Now I want you to pay very close attention to the dates on these screenshots that Doodles shows as he's talking about his degenerate roleplay.
2014, so age 17, still a minor. A lot of things start falling into place. So not only do I start getting super into fetish content, being super supportive of others, and even doing my first error message erotic roleplay that turned into what we are eventually going to get into talking about, creating fetish-centric characters, which had gotten me in trouble when a character wasn't supposed to be sexual, but whose themes were questionable at best, started popping up in other people's communities, and just all in all getting into content that I should not have gotten myself involved with.
And this is also why Doodletones specifically stated previously, the same year that I got into role-playing, I met someone. They don't actually outright make the claim that they got into role-playing from Alex. They just imply it, they heavily suggest it, and the audience ran with it. And they ran with it because they saw it as an opportunity to try and cover for the degeneracy. So that if anyone brings it up, they can say, well, Doodles was groomed into it, despite the fact that in truth, by the evidence we have from Doodle's DeviantArt, that is still public, by the way, and Doodle's own timeline, they were doing degenerate artwork and roleplay before they met their groomer. A year or two before they met the groomer. Doodles in the SCC, what little of an audience they have, and even some of the art community, for years now have been lying, denying, and whipping out shitty excuses. And that's why people still talk about this. And if I'm wrong about this, they're not trying to shield the degeneracy with the grooming, then why is it in Lio Convoy's most recent video discussing me spreading this around, literally just talking about it on Twitter, he mentions the fact that Doodles was groomed.
On RP, Susie herself did not make sexual, but the other party did.
Though the purpose of the RP wasn't to be sexual, that's just where the role player took it, and I allowed it. The misconception about this roleplay being that it was supposed to be inherently sexual is one that I never properly really explained.
In doing her research to properly address this yet again, Susie delved into her old logs, and found out she had been groomed.
When they have no fucking connection because the degeneracy came before the grooming. If they aren't using the grooming to shield criticism and mention and mockery of the degeneracy, then why even mention it? Then why even mention it because someone mentioned the degeneracy? Mind you, this was in the same video that Lio then proceeded to use the excuse that Peaches was groomed for her knowing about the porn in the server that had minors in it, the FCK server.
Here we see Peaches responding to Fuchsia Butters and Miss Zizi spamming porn in the server, wherein Peaches made a joke about it. Now, there's some context here that needs to be highlighted, and that's the fact that Peaches was groomed for 7 years. Even at the time this all happened, they were still being manipulated by said groomer. So even if Peaches was 100% aware that there were kids in the server, which personally I doubt, this is something Peaches had normalized by their groomer.
It's painfully obvious that they're using the grooming, which did happen, and Peaches' grooming, which did happen, to try and cover and make excuses for this. When it doesn't work, it doesn't have any fucking connection, and it's pathetic. I'm telling you right now that they're going to frame this video as victim blaming, or claim that I'm denying that Doodletones was groomed, despite the fact that I'm not. Just watch. Oh, wait, a lovely piece of information that I think everyone should know. I learned from Zay's stream, you guys might know him as Kai Weiss, I learned from his stream and Madlib's being in that stream that someone from the Senate approached her, trying to drag her into a call in the Senate so that they could berate her for misinformation when she brought screenshots to the fucking table. When I say that they've been doing damage control since Madlib's post, I'm not joking. It's exactly why Lio mentioned the same shit that Doodles mentioned in the previous video. This is nothing but damage control because, oh, people are daring to talk about what all these people got up to and have been doing and did a couple of years ago. And they're trying to frame it as false accusations and misinformation when it's not. Ironically, I'm pretty certain Lio has gotten onto other people for falsely trying to present things as misinformation or false accusations when they're true about them. Then again, this wouldn't be Lio Convoy without a little bit of hypocrisy now, would it? So a quick rundown of all these excuses and why none of them fucking work. They always mention Doodles and anyone defending Doodles that Kirby was the one who made that roleplay sexual. As if that's the only roleplay that went sexual when all of the roleplays were fetish-based, and Doodletones had no problem going in that direction. So mentioning that Kirby made it sexual doesn't change a fucking thing because Doodles had no problem with it, on top of the fact that Doodles initiated multiple other fetish-based roleplays. Doodles claims to have been made uncomfortable by the Kirby roleplay, yet never mentions the fact that he returned on an alt account to continue it, because his grandmother found out about his main account and thought he had a mental illness. Perhaps because he was, I don't know, drawing himself, shitting in a diaper? I don't know. For years, they've claimed that it wasn't a fetish of Doodletones, it was just an interest. Just an interest in it. Or mentioning that Doodles was underage, as if that changes what Doodles was doing somehow miraculously. And most recently, they're now claiming that Doodles was groomed into being a degenerate, despite the fact that the evidence shows us that the degeneracy came before the grooming. This could honestly be a very good case study for showing how gaslighting and denial of a group of people that watch a particular person work. In general, the ArtCC's audience would be a perfect case study for that, but especially Doodletones' audience, who have denied for years now that Doodles had a diaper fetish and constantly cling to shitty fucking excuses that don't change a fucking thing. A piece of advice for those that want people to quit talking about it. People most likely aren't going to. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Hell, even false accusations. The diaper fetish isn't a false accusation, but even false accusations still stick around. I have people still trying to accuse me of attempting to dox Slammers, despite the fact that there's no fucking evidence for it. And yet there's a plethora of evidence of this diaper fetish and this degeneracy from Doodletones, and yet there's constant excuses and denial. It's fascinating how that dilemma works. But again, my advice, if you want people to talk about this less, quit whipping out bullshit excuses and lying about it. And that goes to Doodletones and his audience. The reason people get a kick out of this is specifically because of your really shitty excuses and lying about it. Now, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they aren't using the fact that Doodletones was groomed to try and cover for the degeneracy. They aren't going to say that people are victim blaming Doodletones if they dare to make fun of the degeneracy and the weird shit he got up to. They aren't saying that the grooming caused the degeneracy. Surely. So let's go find out ourselves. Let's go to the comment section and let's check out just a few of the comments there and let's get an idea. You sound like you spent a lot of your formative years in online communities. Isn't it crazy how unfiltered a lot of places were back then? I remember on a forum I was a part of, being exposed to adults talking about diaper and vor stuff on a forum based around a fandom that was for general audiences, mind you. 13-year-old me didn't realize those were meant in a sexual way. Meanwhile, they were just being shared out in the open. So that kind of talk got super normalized for me as a kid. It almost sounds like you dealt with something really similar. You don't fucking deserve to have your grooming weaponized against you. That's fucked. Nothing about his grooming is being weaponized against him. No one has talked about his grooming. He was the one that brought up his grooming. No one else has brought it up. The drawings he made, the other roleplays he did, had nothing to do with the fact that he was groomed, because he hadn't been groomed yet. It happened at the ass end of 2014 in November. Up until that point, he was roleplaying and drawing degenerate shit all on his own. Doodles really just need a hug at this point. Christ, no one deserves to be dragged through this decades later. I don't know what the fuck this person is saying, but let's get down here. But whatever, I moved on from that bullshit, and the shit Doodle is being dragged through the mud needs to stop. Wait, let me get this straight. People are using Doodles being groomed shit against her when she is the fucking victim? Bruh, y'all need to get the fuck off of her back and touch grass. Jesus Christ. Okay, so maybe I was right. Hold on, let's just read a little bit more. Let's really find out here. Man, it's sad that people won't stop bothering Susie over this. She was fucking groomed into it. Oh boy, right at the beginning. And yet people still victim blame her and others in a similar situation. Nobody asked to be groomed into shit. It should be the adult's job to leave actual kids alone and fuck off, but no, of course not, because they know teens and kids are vulnerable and easily influenced into shit. The unfortunate truth is, while the internet is forever, context is not. Oh yes, the miraculous context that doesn't actually change a fucking thing. A gross RP is not nearly as bad as it being the symptom of someone being groomed at the age of 17 because of things that were normalized to that person as a teenager. But because many people don't often have the time, information, and or emotional investment, they stop at the gross RP and assume that that is all there is. That's the danger of people like Akumu constantly bringing the past to slander present Susie. Slander. These people throw that word around like Lio Convoy, and yet they don't know what it means. To slander someone, you have to use a false accusation, and nothing about what I've said so far has been false. How about this comment? This is cruel. You were groomed, and these twats are blaming you and bullying you for being a victim. I am so sorry you had to go through this. Susie deserves better. Edit, even Medicare is bored at this point, like you know it's bad when the guy who started this is like, yeah bro, it's cringe, now shut up. Or how about these two comments, which were in my comment sections trying to accuse me of victim blaming in reference to fucking Doodletones. As you can clearly tell, Doodles and his commenters have been using this to make a defense for Doodles, to proclaim that anyone daring to talk about this is victim blaming, and using the fact that Doodles was groomed against them, and that it's so disgusting. That morally sanctimonious bullshit that makes no fucking sense because no one has talked about the fact that Susie was groomed up until he mentioned it. And the degeneracy that he was apparently groomed into, conveniently, was around before the grooming even happened. So make that make sense, but they're not going to make that make sense because they can't. That's why they're pretending as though the grooming resulted in the degeneracy. And then if anyone talks about it or makes fun of him for it, they're making fun of a grooming victim and judging the grooming victim for what they were groomed into, and they're blaming the victim. This shit is predictable. The second I watched that part in the video, I knew exactly where Doodles was taking this, and the exact way that Doodles' audience was going to run with it.
You are coping and seething. You just can't accept what you're seeing. Yes, you're coping and seething. The truth it is scalding, and now you are molding and coping so hard.